The final whistle had not even finished echoing around the stadium when they saw it. 72,000 people on their feet, the noise at a level that made individual thought almost impossible, teammates running toward each other in the specific delirium of people who have just won something enormous. And in the middle of all of it, Cristiano Ronaldo was walking in the wrong direction. Not toward his teammates. Not toward the bench. Not toward the fans in the section behind the goal who were chanting his name with the particular fervor of people who have just witnessed something they will describe to their grandchildren. He was walking toward the center circle. Alone. And the expression on his face was something none of them, not the players who had known him for years, not the staff who had been with him through entire chapters of his career, had ever seen before. They stopped celebrating. One by one, then in groups, then almost all at once. Because there are certain moments that even joy cannot compete with. Moments that reach through the noise and demand attention simply by existing. And Cristiano Ronaldo, standing in the center circle of a World Cup final pitch, alone, while the world celebrated around him, that was one of those moments. Nobody moved toward him. Not immediately. Something in his posture said, "Not yet. Give me this." But what happened next, what he did when he finally looked up, was the thing that shocked them all. The thing that nobody in that stadium had expected. The thing that even the people who thought they knew everything about Cristiano Ronaldo had never seen from him in 41 years of living in public. But here is what nobody understood about that moment, and it changes everything about what you are about to read. The goal had come in the 79th minute. A headed finish from a corner, not the most spectacular goal of his career, not the kind that gets played on highlight reels for its technical brilliance or its audacity. A headed finish. The kind of goal that is decided entirely in the approach, in the reading of the ball's flight, in the positioning built over decades of learning exactly where to be and when. He had scored thousands of goals. He would later be asked, in the press conference, which one this was on the list. He would not answer directly, but anyone who was watching his face when the ball hit the net would have known. It was not the best goal he had ever scored, but it was the last goal he would ever score in a World Cup. He had known it as the ball left his forehead. Not with certainty, you cannot be certain of these things, the future refuses that kind of clarity, but with the particular knowing that comes from having been inside something for so long that you develop a sensitivity to its texture, to the way it feels when something is ending. He had felt it the way you feel the last page of a book before you turn it, not the words, not the story, but the weight of the paper in your hand and the knowledge of what it means. He knew, and he ran toward the corner flag anyway. Celebrated anyway. Let the joy be what it was. Let it arrive without qualification. Because that was what he had decided, in a hotel room a week earlier, writing by hand in handwriting slightly stiff from disuse. Whatever happens, do not waste a single moment of this. Now here is the part of the story that the cameras captured but nobody could explain, until now. When the final whistle blew and Ronaldo began walking toward the center circle, his captain tried to follow him. They had played together for years, had shared dressing rooms and training pitches, and the particular compressed world of international football. That creates bonds different from any other kind. His captain knew him, as well as any non-family member could know him. And something in the walk, the pace of it, the direction, the quality of the silence around it, made the captain stop after 3 steps. He stood and watched. Like everyone else. What Ronaldo did when he reached the center circle was this. He crouched down. Not to one knee, fully down on both knees, on the grass of a World Cup final pitch, in the middle of a stadium full of noise. He placed both hands flat on the grass, held them there, and then he pressed his forehead to the ground. 4 seconds. Maybe 5. The cameras zoomed in. The commentators fell silent. The rare, instinctive silence of professionals who recognize that the moment they are witnessing does not need their words. When he rose, his face was wet. Not from the grass. From something else. His teammates, watching from 20 meters away, did not understand what they had just seen. But they felt it, the specific gravity of a private moment made public, of something real happening in a space that was usually reserved for performance. Here is what that gesture meant, and why Ronaldo had never done it before in 40 years of professional football. He was saying goodbye. Not to football, that would come later, in its own time, in whatever form it came. Not to the World Cup specifically, though yes, this was the last one, and he knew it. He was saying goodbye to something more specific than any of that. He was saying goodbye to the version of himself that had needed this. Needed the proof, the validation, the constant, relentless accumulation of evidence that he was the greatest, that he was enough, that the boy from Madeira, who had been sent away at 12 years old and cried himself to sleep in a dormitory, had become something the world could not ignore. He had spent 40 years building that case. Match by match, goal by goal, trophy by trophy, record by record. The case was complete. It had been complete for a long time, if he was honest. But he had kept adding to it anyway because the habit of proof is hard to break when proof is how you learn to survive. Kneeling on that pitch, with his hands on the grass and his forehead touching the ground, Cristiano Ronaldo let it go. The need, the proof, the constant forward motion of a man who has never fully believed, despite everything, that staying still was safe. He let it go. And what was left, what remained when all of that was released, was the simplest thing. The thing that had been there at the beginning before any of it. He loved this game. And here is where the story turns, because what happened when he stood up was the last thing any of them expected. He looked toward the stands. Not the general stands, a specific section. The section where his family was seated. He found his son in the crowd immediately, the way parents find their children in crowds, by some mechanism that has nothing to do with sight, and everything to do with the particular frequency of love. Cristiano Jr. was on his feet, had been on his feet since the 79th minute, and his face when his father looked up at him was something that the cameras caught and that would later be described in many languages by many people as one of the most affecting images of the tournament. The boy, 18 years old, with his father's eyes and his father's jaw and his father's particular quality of stillness, when something large is happening, was crying. Openly, without embarrassment, the way young people cry before they learn that the world has opinions about men and tears. Ronaldo raised one hand. A simple gesture. Not a wave, something quieter. An acknowledgement. A communication that required no translation because it existed in a language older than any spoken one. I see you. I know you are there. This was for you too. His son pressed his fist to his chest.
Ronaldo nodded.
And then the teammates arrived. Finally, respectfully, after the moment had been what it needed to be, they came. And what happened in that reunion, on the grass of a World Cup final pitch, was something that the people present would spend years trying to describe accurately. Here is what they told people afterward, and why even the most experienced among them struggled to find the right words. Ronaldo embraced each of them. That was not unusual. Footballers embrace after victories. It is the grammar of the moment, the physical language of shared achievement. What was unusual was the quality of it. He held each person for slightly longer than celebration required. He said something to each of them, quiet, private, delivered directly into the ear so that nobody else could hear. Some of them nodded. Some of them responded. Two of them, the youngest members of the squad who were experiencing their first World Cup final, looked afterward like people who had just been given something they did not fully understand yet, but knew was valuable. His captain was last. They had been through the most together, the failed tournaments, the near misses, the years when Portugal were good but not good enough, and they had both stood in defeat and refused to accept it as permanent. When Ronaldo reached him, neither of them spoke immediately. They just stood, foreheads almost touching, in the posture of people who have shared something too large for language. Eventually his captain said, "Well then."
Ronaldo laughed.
A real laugh, surprised and genuine, and slightly wet around the edges. Well then, he agreed. They embraced. And that was enough. But here's the part of that night that nobody reported, because it happened after the cameras had moved on to other stories, other moments, other fragments of the enormous thing that a World Cup final produces. Hours later, long after the on-pitch celebration had migrated into the dressing room and then into whatever formal and informal ceremonies follow a World Cup victory, Ronaldo was sitting in a corridor outside the dressing room. Not hiding. If you're Cristiano Ronaldo, you cannot hide anywhere, and certainly not in a stadium still full of celebrating people. Just sitting. Taking a moment that the night had not otherwise offered. A young member of the ground staff, a kid, barely 20, whose job that evening had been to manage the equipment in the tunnel area, saw him there, and stopped. Froze, actually, the way people freeze when they encounter extreme fame in an unexpected context. He started to back away, apologizing. Ronaldo stopped him.
"Sit down," he said.
The kid sat. They were quiet for a moment. Then the kid said, because he was young enough to ask the things that more experienced people know to leave unasked, "What does it feel like?" Ronaldo looked at him, considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Like being on the last page of something," he said, "and not wanting to turn it. But also, knowing you read every word." Here is what happened the next morning, and why it was, in many ways, the most important moment of everything that had happened over the previous 24 hours. He woke early. Habit. 40 years of early mornings do not dissolve overnight, not even the night after a World Cup final. The hotel was quiet. The celebrations had ended somewhere around 4 in the morning, and the silence that replaced them had the specific quality of silence after very loud things. Almost loud itself, almost present, almost a sound of its own. He went to the window. The city outside was beginning its day, the ordinary, indifferent morning of a place that had hosted something extraordinary and was now returning to itself. Delivery trucks, early commuters, a dog being walked by someone who had perhaps slept through the final entirely. He stood at the window for a long time, thinking about what came next, not with dread, which had been his relationship with this question for years, but with something closer to curiosity. The relief of a man who has been running toward a fixed point for 40 years and has arrived and can now, for the first time, look around and wonder what else is in the landscape. His son knocked on the door at 7.
Came in.
Sat on the edge of the bed without being invited, in the way that children sit in their parents' rooms, with a comfort that does not require permission. They sat together in the morning quiet. Outside, the city moved. And here is what his son said, and why it was the last piece of a story that had been building for 41 years. His son said, "I watched you kneel on the pitch last night. On the replay. 100 times. Ronaldo turned from the window. "I never saw you do that before," his son said. "In any match. Ever." A pause. The city moved outside. A pigeon landed on the windowsill and regarded them briefly before departing. Ronaldo said, "I never had a reason to before."
His son thought about this.
The way 18-year-olds think, visibly, the process showing on their face. Then he said, "What does it mean when you touch the ground like that?" Ronaldo sat down beside him on the bed. Thought about how to say something true in a way that could be received.
"It means thank you," he said.
To the grass. To the game. To everything that happened on pitches like that one, everywhere for 40 years. It means I know what I was given. I know I did not waste it. His son was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, "I want to feel that one day." Ronaldo looked at his son. At the eyes that were his eyes. At the jaw that was his jaw. At the 18-year-old who was at the very beginning of something that his father was at the very end of, and who could not yet know, could not possibly know what the journey between those 2 points would contain. The cost of it.
The beauty of it.
The specific loneliness and the specific joy that exist at the highest levels of a game that takes everything you offer and sometimes, just sometimes, gives back something you could not have imagined. He put his hand on his son's shoulder. "You will," he said. The press conference came at noon. Ronaldo sat at the table in the usual configuration, microphones, cameras, the formal machinery of the moment. Journalists asked their questions. He answered them with the practiced fluency of someone who has been doing this for 20 years, who knows which questions are really asking what they seem to be asking, and which ones are asking something else entirely. One journalist, older, someone who had been covering football for 30 years and who had been present for some of the most significant moments of Ronaldo's career, asked the question that everyone in the room was thinking but few had the standing to ask directly. Was that the last one? Ronaldo looked at him. The room went quiet in the way that rooms go quiet when a significant question has been asked, and everyone present knows it. He did not answer immediately. He looked down at the table for a moment. Then he looked up. "I kneeled on that pitch last night," he said, "because I wanted to say thank you to it. To everything that happened on it. Not goodbye. Thank you." The journalist nodded. He understood the distinction.
Ronaldo Soto.
The press conference was over. He moved through the handshakes and the brief conversations and the organized chaos of the post-tournament world, and eventually he was in the corridor, and then in the elevator, and then back in the quiet of his room. On the desk was the letter, still folded, still in the inside pocket of the jacket he had worn the night before. He took it out, held it without opening it. He did not need to read it.
He knew what the last line said.
Whatever happens, I did not waste a single day of this. He set the letter on the desk, went to the window. The city was fully awake now, the ordinary life of a place continuing in its ordinary way, indifferent to the fact that something extraordinary had happened here and that a man was standing at a window 40 floors above, holding the last page of something he had been writing his entire life. He stood there for a long time, not because he was sad, not because he was afraid, not because the morning after, the famous, terrible morning after, had arrived and brought with it the emptiness that people had warned him about for years. He stood there because the view was beautiful, because the city was alive, because somewhere down there his son was sleeping, and when he woke up he would be at the beginning of something, and that beginning was the best thing Cristiano Ronaldo had ever seen. He turned from the window,
Picked up his phone.
sent one message to his mother in Madeira, who would already be awake, who had watched every minute of the match on a television in the small house that was still, after everything, home. The message said, I kneeled on the pitch last night. For you. For all of it. His mother replied in 4 seconds. As though she had been waiting. As though she had known. She sent one word. Good.
Ronaldo'S millet.
Put the phone down. And began, for the first time in 41 years, to think about what came next.